I am giving myself compassion. I know that I'm on a journey of healing and recovery, and I'm not going to see results overnight, but I know that I'm sacrificing who I used to be for the person that I am becoming. Good morning. So I am just about to leave to drive to the gym. Today's video is going to be all about how mindfulness, mindset, gratitude, affirmations, and journaling helped me to overcome my binge eating disorder. If you haven't already watched my first two videos, the first one where I talk about my eating disorder story, the 10 years of binge eating and restriction and diet culture, and then my second video, which is my tips and what I eat in a day in my binge eating recovery journey, I highly recommend you watch that just for a bit of context. I'll link the videos here in the description and up here. Those two videos touch on more about the external environment and the physical of binge eating disorder and eating disorders in general. This video is going to be a second part to that and more focusing on mindset and the internal. In my personal experience and what I've read online as part of my research into healing and recovering, it is easier to change the external and the physical because it's right there. We can see it, we can feel it, we can touch it. But when it comes to changing things inside our mind, that's where it is the most difficult, but that's where you'll get the most progress and the most change. It's been about 6 months since I started my recovery journey, and now I can feel confident and comfortable to say that I have recovered and I've stopped binge eating. Sometimes I do overeat, but there's a difference between those two, which maybe I'll touch on later. But yeah, that's the purpose of this video, and I hope that this video can help bring you value and help you think outside the box and really focus on more of the holistic approach. So not just the physical body aspect of binge eating and eating disorder recovery, but really focusing on mind, body, and spirit. It's like gloomy, but it is so humid today. It's like 26 degrees, so let's go. Hello everyone, I am back. Went to the gym and then I had lunch, and then I went and stopped by the local thrift store, the local thrift store with my sister, and now I'm eating an ice cream. This is just a Woolworths ice cream sandwich, the cookies and cream one. Just got it yesterday and it's so freaking good. So as I started my recovery journey, I was consuming a lot of podcasts and content. Then I started researching and really getting into learning about how the brain works. And I think that is so incredibly empowering if you actually educate yourself on how the brain works and why it does what it does, why we have these thoughts that we think, why we negative self-talk, why we compare ourselves to others. We do so many of these things because it is a coping mechanism, a protective mechanism, and a survival mechanism of our brain to cope with, the external environment, the societal pressures, the programming. So after educating myself and learning, and I really highly encourage you to just do your own research. YouTube, there's a bunch of TED Talks about neuroplasticity, neuroscience, the left brain versus the right brain. That was one that was really eye-opening for me, is learning about the difference between the observing brain and the thinking brain. And I like to think of those two things as the thinking brain is very similar to the ego self. So if you've read The Power of Now, which I read but I haven't finished, I'm still in the process of reading. The ego, so all of our negative self-talk, the voice inside our heads that is our biggest critic, the tyrant, that is our thinking brain. Our thinking brain, operates on that survival mechanism. But there is also a part of us that is the observing brain, where we literally can step out, acknowledge, feel what we're feeling, but not let it control us. And that's what so many people talk about when they talk about, that you actually are in control of your thoughts. You are. So I was, riding that wave, and then I came across neuroplasticity. Okay, so I have a definition that I looked up because I'm not going to say this eloquently. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life. In other words, it's how the brain can change itself. Hello, it's Friday afternoon. I am just about to go grocery shopping and just run a couple of errands. Where we left off in the vlog was talking about the concept of neuroplasticity, and the concept of neuroplasticity was so powerful to me because it was hard evidence in front of me to see that I could actually change my brain and my behavior. So knowing that and having that physical evidence in front of me showing that I could actually change myself, I then sort of went on a journey and I don't know, just kind of came across it as I was riding the wave of personal development. I came across journaling. So I've always had a diary from when I was younger, but I never actually tried the practice of journaling with prompts until last year in the lockdown and during my binge eating recovery journey. I first started off as journaling and keeping like a food diary, or not a food diary, but a recovery journey. And whenever I would feel the urges to binge, or whenever I did have a binge, I would journal about it and I would use prompts like, today's date is blah blah blah, I feel blah blah blah, I feel this way because blah blah blah, because of this I'm going to blah blah blah. Journaling has been so powerful and important for me in not just this recovery journey, but in my own self-healing and journey to self-love, because it has been a way for me to release and properly and healthily process my emotions. And a big thing about binge eating is basically that it is a coping mechanism when you're feeling stressed or when things are going on and you just need that quick dopamine hit, and it's so easy for you to switch to that binge eating. So that's what journaling allowed me to do. Now my little sister is here, I have to run, I'm going to go grocery shopping, and I will continue about journaling in a bit. It's 9:30 p.m. and I've got a couple of things to do before I quickly can turn in and call it a night. I just wanted to finish what I was saying on the topic of journaling and just wrap this up before moving to the other bits and pieces. I think one of the biggest challenges and root causes of the binge eating disorder, or any ED, or kind of any unhealthy coping mechanism that you would have, is your inability to correctly process those emotions, so you turn to destructive or self-sabotaging behaviors. Binge eating and turning to food was a really quick and easy way for me to immediately make myself feel comfortable, immediately make myself feel something different at first, because whatever that feeling that I was feeling at the moment, whether it be being stressed or overwhelmed or anxious or depressed, I knew that I could go to food and I could numb myself from that from a little bit. But it wasn't until, after the binge that you get that guilt, that shame, and the regret, and then the cycle starts over. And during those times before I really started my binge recovery journey, I hadn't journaled properly in years. And us humans, our bodies and brains are designed to want to release whenever we feel any sort of emotion bubbling up. We cry when we're upset, we sweat when we're tired, and when you're stressed and overwhelmed, sometimes all you need to do is take a piece of paper and write down how it is you're feeling. It's very similar to when you call up a friend and you vent to them, and after those conversations when you're feeling down, you'll often hear that friend or you saying, I just feel so much better after venting to you. And I've never really been that sort of person where I go to friends to vent about, and I never did, about binge eating. This was all completely personal, and I guess that's a whole another big part of binge eating, is that because it's so incredibly shameful. I remember, until I really started posting about it on my Instagram throughout the 10 years, I would not tell anybody, not one single person, about how I was really feeling in all these binge restrict cycles, just because I was so dead embarrassed. And that's really hard when you're holding on to all of these emotions and all of these thoughts, beating yourself up constantly, restricting yourself, and then binging due to other circumstances and facts in your life. You're literally just having a whirlwind, a cyclone of emotions that are just going crazy, and there's no way for you to release them other than with food. So journaling has really helped me to healthily process and release those emotions, and I really encourage you the next time, even after you've binged, like in this diary that I kept during my recovery journey, there were times where I would diarize and journal after I binged, or on my good days I would write about how I was feeling. But the most important thing is that I would always reflect on that day and whatever triggers that might have arose, and I really tried to analyze. And at the end of every journal after I had binged or overeaten, I would say to myself, I am giving myself compassion. I know that I'm on a journey of healing and recovery, and I'm not going to see results overnight, but I know that I'm sacrificing who I used to be for the person that I am becoming. Hey everyone, it is Saturday afternoon and I'm up in the Central Coast. I just had a makeup lesson done by Brittany Ivory, who is an amazing makeup artist. I had this book 6 months ago as a little birthday present for myself when I was still kind of doing my makeup YouTube, and I just haven't been as motivated to do looks and, you know, make an effort to put on makeup. I guess being in the gym so much, I don't really want to sweat the makeup off, and I just haven't been bothered, I guess, with all of the lockdowns and COVID. But doing this makeup lesson again really made me realize how much I did love makeup and how much of a creative outlet it is, and I learned so many new techniques. Okay, so now moving on to gratitude and affirmations. A little bit of context before we get into that. I think it's really important that I touch on the importance and the science behind sound and the fact that sound carries energy. This might be a little bit woo-woo to some of you, and I know at first I was a little bit skeptical again because I just only discovered this a few months ago, but you can look this up yourself and you do your own research on it. But as we know, sound travels in sound waves and frequencies like we hear on radio stations, and sound waves have energy. You can look at somatics, which is the science and the study of physical indentation of sound, and it's basically when sound will imprint on things like water and sand. You can have a look at Dr. Emoto's study of snowflakes and water, and it's where this scientist basically did a study and he had different snowflake and water samples, and he exposed these different samples to music like rock, classical, words of hatred, words of love and affirmation, and it was those positive words of love and affirmation that created beautiful imprintations and patterns, and those samples that were exposed to the words of destruction and hate were basically deformed and formed no pattern. So there's a lot of studies in that. There are also the grandfather clock studies where a study was done where a bunch of different grandfather clocks were put in a room, and eventually all of the ticking all started to sync all together. So yes, please do your research on that because it's really interesting. And I also read the book The 4 Agreements, which really, really inspired me to be more impeccable with my word. And basically, as it says in that book, that means to be very careful about how you use your words. The way that we talk to our best friends or our families, we would be supportive to them, we would be loving to them, we would never put them down like we put ourselves down. And when it comes to binging and just body image, we literally shit talk ourselves. We are the worst. When you understand that sound carries energy and what you say actually matters, when you're telling yourself all this negative self-talk, then that's the frequency that you put yourself in. That's the energy that you carry throughout the day. With gratitude, I love to start my day off with it and journal things that I'm grateful for, because it helps me and sets me up for a day where I'm in an energy where I am obviously grateful for things around me, but I am in a state of calm and peace because I have enough, and I don't have that sense of lacking and that sense of not being enough and sense of always falling short of something, which is the biggest thing when it comes to eating disorders and body image dysmorphia. And when you come from a place of gratitude, you look at the things that you're grateful for in yourself, in your family, in your friends, what you have in this life, you know, being grateful that we even have our health, that we are even alive. It kind of helps me to sort of blur out and all of that white noise, all the things that shouldn't matter, like society's pressures and the expectations that I set up on myself, they kind of fade into the distance. So that's why I love gratitude. And when you get into the law of attraction and manifestation, gratitude is actually one of the most key things to start off with, because, you know, as they always say, like attracts with like, and when you come from an energy where you are grateful for what you already have, then you can actually be abundant and receive more. Whereas if you're in a place of desperation and feeling of lackness, which is where I was coming from when I was in the cycles of binging and restriction, I was coming from a place of desperation, being desperate to diet and restrict and wanting to lose that weight quickly, and, you know, making those mindset shifts of wanting to exercise and eat better for my long-term health, and because I'm grateful for this life and this body that I have. That really helps me to shift that mindset and just put things in a different perspective. And same goes for affirmations. I love to start my day off with affirmations, and we know that sound is powerful, and sound carries energy, literal energy, and you can tell when you walk into a room with someone and they just give off bad vibes or negative vibes, and that carry that sort of demeanor around them. That's actually what we're referring to here, is that frequency and energy. So I'm just going to wrap this up because I have to leave now, but yeah, I just want to say that in your recovery journey, I really highly recommend you to start journaling affirmations and gratitude, and essentially reflect, process and acknowledge the emotions that you have in a more healthier manner, and also talk to yourself like you would talk to a best friend. Be nice to yourself and affirm yourself instead of talking shit.
Why